repentance, praying in faith, and uniting in the hope of another great awakening. Is it possible God is stirring the hearts of His people to seek Him like never before? Matthew Henry said, when God intends for great mercy upon His people, He first sets them to pray. Are you ready for a divine visitation? This is Byron Paulus for OneCry.com.
Greetings, KELP listeners. My name is Terry Gray, and I have the joy and privilege of serving as the pastor of Calvary Chapel Sun City, located on the west side of El Paso. I also have the joy of connecting with the radio audience in the borderland through the Summons broadcast heard each weekday at 5 p.m. right here on this station. On Summons, we study the Bible book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, precept by precept. Please join us each weekday at 5 p.m. for Summons right here on KELP.
You are listening to KELP El Paso. Feed your mind. Feed your soul at 1590 AM, 95.9 FM, streaming worldwide at KELPradio.com.
915 Talk is a production of Desert Voice Media. You can visit desertvoice.media to learn more.
915 TALK.
The world is looking at El Paso.
What will we say to the world? From the KELP studio in El Paso, this is 915 Talk.
And now your host.
Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines. Oh, Kitty on the board. Listen to this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's all these armed forces, all these branches of the military. When you were a young man, Kenny on the board, did you ever think of joining the military?
No. I did play Army men, but no.
You never thought about securing the blessings of liberty to yourself and posterity?
When I was a kid. All I wanted to do was ride my bike and shoot my friends.
Oh. You never thought about providing for the common defense, ensuring domestic tranquility?
I don't think most kids think about that.
Yeah,
They may want to be in the military, but not. I don't think it's for those reasons.
Yeah, I didn't think too much about it, but when I thought about it, I was thinking of joining the Coast Guard.
Here in El Paso?
No, this is Ohio. I thought I'd join the Coast Guard, but my dad told me I couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah, he said to join the Coast Guard, you have to be 6 feet tall. Did you know that?
No.
No, yes.
I don't think that's true. I know some people in the Coast Guard. They're not 6 feet tall.
Yeah, I'm just a little under 6 feet, so I didn't qualify. And my dad explained to me you have to be 6 feet tall to join the Coast Guard because that way if your boat sinks, you can walk to shore.
Your dad is a wise man.
So I knew I couldn't join the military. I couldn't do that. I could not do that. We've had a few military folks in on this program.
Yes.
We had a military police colonel. We've had Army chaplains. Today we have an active duty U.S. Army officer.
Nice.
Stationed at Fort Bliss.
Thank you for your service, sir.
Yeah. He has served in the Army for over 14 years, including 3 deployments to Afghanistan.
Wow.
He has served in a variety of leadership positions, including as an infantry platoon command leader. Kenny on the board, how many people are in a platoon?
In a platoon?
Yeah.
I don't know, 30, 50?
That's a good guess. Yeah, it's about 40.
Nice. You're on track, Kenny on the board. So our guest today is a husband and father of 4. He's an avid reader, enjoys writing, and is always seeking to learn new things. He is passionate about leadership, and we're going to be talking about leadership, Kenny on the board.
Okay.
Yeah, because, I was thinking about the Civil War recently, and U.S. military officers, back in the day, they would lead the charge.
Yes, they would.
They would be right out in front and be the first ones to be, in harm's way.
Yes,
I think it's different now. We might have to ask our guest about that. What's going on? What's happened to the military leadership since since the Civil War?
What's happened to leading the charge?
Yeah, but we're going to be talking about leadership. Our guest also enjoys helping people apply leadership principles in their work and life. He's also a member of St. Clement's Anglican Church in El Paso, which lines up with having 4 kids. I think everyone at St. Clement's has 4 kids. So without further ado, let's give a very warm Borderland welcome to the one, the only, Austin Caroe. Austin, welcome to 915 Talk.
Thanks so much for having me, Andy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking leadership, but before we get into that, we have a little disclaimer. Nothing in this program is in any way to be construed as medical advice. No, that's not it. I'll read the real one. The views and opinions expressed by Austin Caroe on this show, on his YouTube channel, and his online newsletter are his own, and not necessarily the views and opinions of the U.S. Army, the Department of War, or the U.S. government. Having said that, let's chat.
Absolutely.
So this idea of leadership in the military, it was interesting today. I was visiting your Substack, your blog page, and you were talking about how leadership is like driving a Zamboni.
Yeah. So I have about 70 essays on my Substack that people can go to. It's called The Distro, so you can find it at thedistro.substack.com. And I started writing in 2022, shortly after the fall of Afghanistan. I wrote an essay which went kind of viral, and I had done a lot of writing, and I just started kind of putting it out there. Zamboni was one of my more recent pieces. I haven't written anything in quite a while, but the whole point of that essay specifically was just to talk about the difference, how people view leadership as something that's driven by mindset versus something that's driven by behavior.
Right. So one of the things you said in there, and please correct what I'm about to say, but that leadership is often portrayed in popular leadership literature as being a mindset. And what I understood is that kind of grinds your grits.
A little bit, yeah. So when you look at the U.S. Army has excellent doctrine on leadership. It's written excellent manuals that people can go and read. They're very concise. They're very well written. And when you look at what leadership is, you have to start with, what is it? How do you define it? And people define it in all different ways. But the way the Army defines it is that leadership is the activity. It is an activity of influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission or improve the organization. So leadership is an activity.
Right. It's an activity, meaning I think that's what you were saying. It's like driving a Zamboni.
That's right.
We're in El Paso. Maybe not everyone has been to an El Paso Rhinos match. Our local hockey team, the Zamboni is the what is it? The piece of equipment that makes the ice smooth.
That's right.
Between the periods in a hockey game, that's an activity, and leadership is an activity.
That's right.
And so with that, can the Army teach someone to be a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So your leadership potential is going to be a combination of your innate skills. Some people are excellent communicators. Some people are, maybe they're not great communicators, but they're great thinkers. But what the Army does when it teaches leaders is it starts with that definition, and it gives people an opportunity as they rise through the ranks to actually practice leadership and give them feedback on how they're doing. There's not really a focus on mindset, which you might read in popular culture, or you might read in popular books about leadership. It's really focused on behavior and what you do.
So what I heard you say, the term is the Army gives its potential leaders, I suppose, or its leaders, the opportunity to practice leadership.
That's right.
That's an interesting word because you think about doctors, they practice medicine. I guess they're still learning. What does practicing leadership look like in the Army?
Yeah, so again, if we look at it as an activity of influencing, right, that is what the definition is, the activity of influencing people. Well, you have to ask, how do you influence someone? So there's a lot of different ways that you can influence people. The Army has 9 ways that it lists in its manual, but it's very easy to think about these things arrayed along a continuum of compliance, getting compliance from people, and building their commitment. So compliance, a method of compliance is something called, one of the methods would be pressure. Right? Pressure is simply, hey, Bob, you're going to give me those reports, or, I'm going to write you up. That would be an example of pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
And then on the other end, on the compliance end, you might have something called inspirational appeals, which is, hey guys, we're the best team in the world, and nobody's better than us, and we're going to go out and we're going to do this thing. That's on the other end. That's on the commitment end.
Right. Okay. So in your Army experience, you've been deployed in Afghanistan 3 times. You're an officer. How did you practice leadership?
That's a great question. So as you're coming up through the ranks, or as you're going through your training program, for me it was the Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC, that I did at Vanderbilt University. You get a lot of opportunities to lead your peers, or to lead lowerclassmen, freshmen. When you're with junior, you're leading freshmen, you're leading sophomores. So you get a little bit of leadership experience, but everyone's basically in the same cohort. You're all you're going to college. It gets more difficult when you get out into the real Army and you have to lead real soldiers from people that are from completely different backgrounds. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them are not college educated. They're coming from, they're coming from cities. They're coming from the country. It's an incredibly diverse environment that you have to lead people, and so there is no one size fits all leadership formula that you can apply, because every context is going to be different, and every platoon that you take over as a young officer is going to be different. And so when you get into the position is the first time that you are really getting a chance to practice leadership.
Okay. All right. So you became a platoon leader and you began practicing, and what did you learn?
Well, I was a terrible platoon leader. Well, so there's a redemption arc there. So for my first platoon, I was a terrible platoon leader, and partly that was just age and immaturity. I was 21 years old.
Okay.
When I took over a platoon, and we were getting ready to go to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And I had read all of the John Maxwell books and all these other things, and I had this idea that, well, if you just connect with people, if you build these relationships, then they'll follow you and they'll do what you say.
Right.
I kind of found out the hard way that that's not the whole story.
Right.
And what we leave out of the popular literature is the importance of getting compliance. People are very good at, well, not everybody, but people tend to be quite good at building relationships, people that are people oriented, but they're not necessarily great at when the hammer needs to drop, because that's the context that you're in, then being a little bit more aggressive and getting that compliance from people. And that's what I had to learn as a young platoon leader. I was completely unable to use compliance-based methods of influence to accomplish the mission and improve the organization.
Yeah, okay. You were unable, and you were 21 years old. I think I have a son who, well, I know I have a son who just turned 22. I'm thinking of him. He is, I believe he demonstrates incredible maturity for his age. At the same time, I can't imagine him with 40 soldiers in Afghanistan in life and death situations. And what you struggled with was this compliance thing. And in a active duty situation on the front, you have to be compliant because it's a matter of safety. Was it you were struggling to say, if you don't do this, then this will happen, there will be consequences? Was that the struggle?
I think at the bottom of it was just lack of confidence. I all through my training in ROTC, I had very strong, very professional, non-commissioned officers who help train the officers. And when you take over a platoon, you have non-commissioned officers that are there to help you. You'll have a platoon sergeant, you have squad leaders, you have people who have been in the Army, in some cases, 14 or more years, 15, 20 years.
Sure.
So they've been in the Army almost as long as I've been alive. at that point. So that's intimidating as a young
Sure.
officer to try to take that over. So I felt like, and during my training, the NCOs would always tell me, look, you're going to struggle as a platoon leader because you're going to try to go in there and you're going to try to take stuff over. But what you have to do is listen to your platoon sergeant.
Okay.
Now, I had great NCOs for the most part, but they were very strong-willed, and they didn't always have the best ideas about where we needed to go, and they needed leadership. I was unable to provide that as a young platoon leader because I was too deferential, and I was not willing to just say, hey, this is the way it's going to be done, and it's going to be done that way because I'm the platoon leader. And I say that's the way it's going to be done. And sometimes, again, depending on your context, that's what has to be done. You have to force compliance.
Okay, so you're in Afghanistan. You have 40 men. The leaders that you're leading are, like, I'm just gonna say, grizzled combat veterans. You're fresh out of college, so to speak, out of training, and they're really, what I'm hearing you say is they're looking for a strong leader. They're looking for someone who's going to say this is the way it is.
You know, and that's the interesting thing. It's not that they were looking for that. It's that that's what they needed.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's actually another, that's another topic that I like to talk about when people talk about servant leadership. We talk about servant leadership and we think that that is like a super soft, super kind thing. But let me tell you, you are not serving your platoon. You are not serving your soldiers if you don't force them to do the things that they may not want to do that are going to keep them safe and they're going to keep you combat effective.
Yeah, I that's an interesting thing. We're Christian radio here. We have Bible programs all day. It's interesting, you think about Jesus, our Lord Jesus Christ. I think a lot of times as the church, when we think about his leadership, really the only word we can come up with to describe it is, well, Jesus was really nice.
Yeah.
But the Bible doesn't say that. It says he was kind. And there's actually a difference. We can be nice. We can say the thing that won't offend someone. But often the cruelest thing we can do is be nice because we're not dealing with things. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at. If you're a platoon commander and it's a matter of life and death and you're worried about stepping on toes, that's not very kind because it's a danger situation.
You could not have said it better, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because when you talk about God, what we know about God is that he is both at the same time perfectly just and perfectly merciful.
Yeah.
And when we look at the compliance to continuum, or the compliance to commitment continuum, we see that compliance is really about justice. It is about doing things that you have to do.
Sure.
And building commitment is really about mercy. Right,
Yeah.
it's really a more merciful thing, and what I try to talk about in my newsletters and things like that is blending compliance and commitment-based methods of influence and adapting them to the situation. And so when we think about God as perfectly just and perfectly merciful, it means that he is always exercising perfect leadership at all times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting to think about. I think as the church, we often talk about ourselves as being a family, but we're also an army. We're both at the same time. And it's interesting because I would think that probably, you mentioned John Maxwell, a lot of church leadership books are more on the commitment end of the spectrum rather than the compliance. And to be fair, probably if a pastor stands up and says, if you don't do this, then we're going to kick you out of the church, most of the church would be like, that's okay. And they'll go to a different church the next week. As an Army officer who grapples with this issue all the time, and as a man of faith, what would your input be for the church as they look to become stronger?
I think it's going to depend on the church. And there are some churches, I think, and we see these are the ones that end up in the news, where you have these big mega churches and these pastors get accused of things like toxic leadership or being too overbearing. So I think that in a context like that, you may have to go back and look at commitment-based methods of influence. So it depends on the church itself. But I mean, to your point, I think a lot of churches do move towards commitment-based methods of influence, and that's just it's a people it's a people organization. It's a people-based organization,
sure.
and so we talk about shepherding the flock and things like that. So it's a lot about building connection. But yeah, you have to be able to figure out how to use compliance-based methods in order to get things done. I mean, especially if you're in a big church that has a lot of different projects going on, you need people to do stuff. But again, it's about finding the right method of influence for the right situation and trying to harmonize. They might have said balance earlier, but you're really trying to harmonize compliance-based methods with commitment-based methods and apply that to the situation that you're in.
Love it. If you're just joining us, we're with U.S. Army Officer Austin Caroe. We're talking really about lessons of leadership from his time of service in the U.S. Army. We did get a question from a listener, Ben, asking us to define again compliance and commitment on that continuum. So could we do that one more time before we go into a break?
Yeah, absolutely. So on one end, you have compliance-based methods, and that's about getting compliance out of people, getting them to do things. And on the other hand, you have commitment, not necessarily getting someone to do something, but building their commitment to the organization so that they're more intrinsically motivated. So compliance is about typically using extrinsic motivators, things outside the person, to get them to do the things that the organization needs them to do.
Yeah, if you don't do this, you'll be fired. If you don't do this, you don't get to go home until you're done with the job.
Exactly,
whatever the case would be.
Those are compliance-based methods. And then you have, on the other end, you have commitment, which is just building commitment to the organization so people are going out and looking for doing the right thing, often without even being told about. You're enabling people to go out and take action in the absence of orders.
Right. And you were saying the first time you were a platoon commander, you were trying too hard on the commitment end of the spectrum, and it did not work.
That's right.
So there's the story continues for you, so we'll get into that after the break. Before we go into our break, this is your daily reminder that 915 Talk is a production of Desert Voice Media. The website is just that, desertvoice.media, and you can listen to this or any previous 915 Talk conversation on that site. You can also check out what we've been praying for, 915 Pray. We pray for the 915 at 9:15 a.m. and 9:15 p.m. each and every weekday on this radio station. I hope you're joining with us. Also, you can listen to 915 Testify if you need a little injection of encouragement in your life. It's so great to hear how God is working here in our community on those 60-second specials we air throughout the day of testimonies from our brothers and sisters here in our community. We will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. We're going to go into a break. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
915 Talk is listener supported and is a production of Desert Voice Media. That's right. It's people just like you who make this program possible. Together with Desert Voice, you can learn how to better serve our neighbors and pray for our community. To become a Desert Voice Media partner, you can visit desertvoice.media. That's right. That's the website, desertvoice.media. Take a look and join us today in reaching our borderland for Christ.
915.
Testify.
I was 10 years into a 20-year bid in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, doing 23 hours a day in a cell, solitary confinement. I was at a breaking point in life where I was just hopeless, depressed. I couldn't find no peace. It brought me to my knees in a prison cell, and I met Jesus. He delivered me from addiction, from a life of crime, the gangs, from evil, wicked ways. To the gang member that's lost, to the drug addict, Jesus loves you, and no matter what you've done in this world, in this life, the doors are open. When I met Jesus Christ, he touched my heart in a powerful way. I was once a heroin addict, a thief, an all-around bad person. My name is Daniel Chavez. I'm from Central El Paso, and I just want the world to know that if he did this for me, he could do it for anybody.
And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb
And by the word of their testimony.
Desertvoice.media.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
You are listening to 915 Talk. I'm your host, Andy Frecka. Today we're with U.S. Army Officer Austin Caroe. We're talking about lessons in leadership learned during his military service. We're talking about leadership that is based on compliance and leadership that's based on commitment. And Austin, really your story of you shared a 21-year-old platoon commander here there in Afghanistan. The way I'll put it, it sounds like you're trying to be everyone's best friend.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And you thought that would be good leadership, and it didn't work.
No, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
So I was going through with that first platoon, and I hit my kind of my time limit, and someone else needed to come in and take another platoon. But luckily, I was able to convince my battalion commander to send me to another battalion to take another platoon because I was so dissatisfied with how I had done. I was ashamed. I had trained my whole life. I had thought my whole life about leading an infantry platoon in combat, and I felt like I had done a really, really bad job. And so luckily I was able to go to another unit, take another platoon, and I had about a 6-week break in between. And during that 6-week break, I sat down, I did a lot of praying, I did a lot of reflecting, and I realized that I had just not been the leader that platoon needed. And I knew for my second platoon that I needed to be the leader that they needed to be. So I needed to learn how to use compliance, because there's not two different leaderships. There's different methods of compliance. And so leadership is about, again, taking the methods of compliance and the methods of commitment. And a lot of the times they blend into each other, depending on how you apply them. But it's about using them in a way that is harmonious, that gets the unit or gets the organization or the company, whatever it is, gets the people that you're leading where they need to be and accomplishing your mission.
Right. Yeah. When I think of that, I kind of made a little bit of a joke at the beginning of the program about how leadership has changed over the years. The Civil War, the general was out in front and the first one in harm's way, and then you lose really your leadership often, I would think, very quickly. Now I think it's different. I think of, today, if you're in an active combat zone, really as the leader, you need to inspire is probably the wrong word, but you need to convince your troops to go into harm's way. So I would think that goes beyond just you as a person. It's the whole culture and everything else. So how do you convince someone to do something that is not natural?
Wow, that's a really good question. So I would say if you get into combat and you have to convince your soldiers right before you cross the line of departure, it's like, they show up and it's like, no one told me that this was going to be dangerous. Right. So that's built-in training. And that's really the key, and that training is really the key, and that's why units have to train together. If I can tell a quick story, some people are familiar with the movie We Were Soldiers, or maybe the book We Were Soldiers, and that's about a battalion that goes into Vietnam, and they got into a pitched battle, and they were outnumbered, and they were outgunned, and they were led by this amazing leader named Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore. And Hal Moore is a case study in brilliant leadership. So prior to going to Vietnam, he is able to hand select his own people. He trains his own platoon leaders. They train together, and they go and they put on an absolutely virtuoso performance in terms of combat performance. Their sister battalion did not do that. They were a lot of people that were thrown together kind of at the last minute. They had cooks and logisticians that were all thrown together at the last minute and put into a battalion. And they were on the same battlefield in different areas, but part of the same operation. And they were ambushed, and they were completely overrun and made combat ineffective very, very quickly.
Wow.
And so there's no amount of leadership at that point. You could have Napoleon Bonaparte or whatever amazing leader, and you put him in that position in the middle of the battle, there's nothing you can do. It's already too late. And so that's the importance of preparation and training to go forward into battle. And that's where teamwork is built, and that's where people learn to work together to go out and do their mission.
Right. So again, what I'm hearing is it begins in training, and you think of all these war movies, whatever the war movie is, it's often, Napoleon, as you said, or whoever on his horse running in front of his soldiers and giving them, his gladiator speech, and everyone charges. But you're saying it should not have to come down to that.
Well, it can. I mean, the position of a leader needs to be at the point of greatest friction. Or that's where their focus needs to be.
Okay.
So if you're a 4-star general and you're in charge of thousands or tens of thousands of troops, maybe the point of friction for your division or whatever it is that you're leading, maybe it's not in the middle of a firefight, because your friction is going to be at a much higher echelon. It's about synchronizing artillery and combat aviation. That's where the organizational friction for that leader is going to be. So again, we've talked about the importance of context and applying the methods of influence in the right context. Where the leader positions themselves also is heavily dependent on the context, because where the greatest friction is going to be is where their focus needs to be.
Okay. If you're just joining us again, we're with Austin Caroe. We're talking about leadership. You were saying the leader needs to be where the greatest point of friction is. I think there's definitely a lesson for other organizations in that. But I think a lot of times the leader wants to be where the greatest success is.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And not where the friction is.
Yeah. If I can tell a quick story about
Sure.
that. There was, when I was in business school at Southern Methodist University at the Cox School of Business, someone came and talked to us from American Airlines. And they were talking about how they were trying to get their employees to use the kiosks that are now all over the airport. Most of the times you do your check-in, you go to a kiosk. Well, these employees were not, first they were looking at the data. They weren't going to the airport. The leadership team was looking at the data, and they were saying, why aren't the employees using these kiosks? Well, someone from the leadership team decided to do the really smart thing, which was go to the point of friction. They actually went to the airport to look, what are the employees doing? And it turns out what the employees were doing were just unplugging the machines at the beginning of the day. Which is why no one was using them. And the reason, and so she wasn't emotional about this. She didn't go and start berating people. She just went and asked, hey, why are you guys doing this?
Yeah.
And it was a combination of, look, it's more work for us anyway, because we have to help the customers use the machine. No one knows how to use it. No one's familiar with these things. And it was a combination of fear. They were afraid of getting replaced.
Yeah.
And so now we've really understood. They went, that leader went to the point of friction.
Yeah.
Found out what was the actual problem, and now there's an organizational level fix that can be applied about addressing those concerns.
Yeah, so interesting. We're talking about leadership with U.S. Army officer Austin Caroe, but now we need to find out what's going on out there on the roads. Charlie One, what are you seeing out on the roads this afternoon?
Well, PD are busy with crashes going on this afternoon, quite a few of them, and mostly on the east side. And I'll get to these right now because I-10 East at Americas, we have a crash. It's on the right lane. There's some slow PD, not at the scene yet. We have fire department there, though. I-10 East at Americas, so caution there. Then we go to South Kleinfield and Stone Castle on a wreck. That just happened. PD on the way. Lee Trevino and Rojas crash. That just happened. PD on the way to that. And PD just arrived at Gateway East at Americas in a separate crash here. That crash has a tie-up and congestion here, Gateway East at Americas, plus the one I-10 East at Americas. So that whole area kind of congested right now. In Fort Bliss, we have Bergen Street and Infantry Road on an injury crash, but we have PD fire department on that one, so use extra caution this afternoon. And Andy, back to you.
Charlie One, this afternoon in the studio we have U.S. Army officer Austin Caroe. We're talking about leadership, and when you think of the U.S. military, our nation's finest, they're providing for the common defense so that the rest of us can pursue happiness. I think that for them, when they're tired at the end of the day, what they really would like to enjoy, especially if they're stationed here in El Paso at Fort Bliss, would be a bowl of menudo. Where would you recommend they find that bowl of menudo?
That's true, and at the end of the day, they don't have to get in their car and go get it somewhere, look for a place to get it, but they can have it, maybe the wife or somebody can bring it home before they get home, and just go to Eastside Choice Meats, Loveland and Treewood, because they have and this is homemade menudo. It's not, doesn't come from a factory out of town or canned or anything like that. It's a jar, homemade menudo, very delicious homemade menudo. Or they can also get, and then you can also get the chile con queso just in time for those football games this Sunday. So, yeah, Gateway East and Loveland, Eastside Choice Meats, that's where our nation's finest, they can go get their menudo, the breakfast of champions, Andy.
Thank you, Charlie One. We'll talk soon. And we're back with Austin Caroe talking leadership, talking about what you've learned as an Army officer. We're talking about this idea of commitment versus compliance as a leader. If you're listening and you do have a question about for Austin on this subject, you can use the KELP radio app. Just use that button, message the studio. I see them right here on my computer screen. Alternatively, you can go to KELP Christian Radio on Facebook, where we have live video, or 915 Talk on YouTube. I keep an eye on all those comment sections and can answer any questions. But another question came in, and it was, what are the pitfalls of being exclusively compliant or committed?
Wow, that's an excellent question. So I actually have names for these.
Okay.
So for leaders who are too focused on commitment-based methods, like I was as a platoon leader, I actually say that person is a milquetoast. Right, so
milquetoast.
Right, someone who's just like too submissive, too deferential. That's the problem that you're going to fall into, and you can start to see problems with safety. People aren't following, safety protocols and things like that. And then for the compliance side, people that are too focused on compliance, I call them tyrants.
Okay.
People that just, they're not building relationships. They're short-term focused, and they're just trying to get things done right now. And so they're willing to put pressure on people to get them to do the things that they want done. And then I would say that there's a third type of leadership pathology that you can fall into, which I call being a bipolar leader.
Okay.
Which is essentially half the time, you know this type of person, right? Where it's like half the time you don't know if you're going to get screamed at or if you're going to get, asked
a pizza party.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You don't know if they're going to ask, how are your kids and all these other things. When you get called to the boss's office, if you don't know which one you're going to get, that leader's probably displaying a little bit of bipolar leadership, where they're not. It's because they're not harmonizing. They're trying to balance. I'm very, I'm a hard person half the time, and I'm a really soft person the other half. It's not about balance. It's about harmonizing the methods of influence.
Right. Yeah. I think very often what the word that is often used in the church is balance. Like everything should be balanced. I actually don't know if I agree with that. I think that we should grow in every area all the time. Even if you're strong in the compliance area, it doesn't mean you should become weak. And because you could just become weak and then you're balanced,
right,
and then nothing is happening,
Exactly right.
And so we need to become stronger in both ways. But we talked about your first stint in Afghanistan, the hard lessons you learned. I'll say this, hats off to you for just being self-aware and seeing, I think you described it as a failure in leadership.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of leaders struggle to come to terms with the fact that they maybe didn't do so well, but we're not going to get better unless we have a little self-criticism.
That's right. Yeah, know yourself and seek self-improvement. And so during that 6-week break that I had between platoons, look, we talked about, I did a lot of reflection, I did a lot of writing, I tried to figure out what went wrong. And I knew, the first thing I figured out was I can't overcorrect. I can't go into my second platoon and be a tyrant and try to just run it the way that I want to run it, because I knew that wasn't going to work. So I didn't want to overcorrect. So I really focused in on, I'm going to figure out what this platoon needs, and I'm going to try to give the platoon what it needs.
Right.
And that's really what, again, we talked about servant leadership earlier. That's what being a servant leader is. It's about giving people what they need. Sometimes they need a swift kick in the pants, proverbially.
Yes.
And sometimes, they need a hug.
Right.
And it just depends on the situation. And so when I got into that second platoon, I sat down with my platoon sergeant and I counseled him on paper. I wrote down my expectations, that this is what I expect from you, and I'm going to hold you to this. And I was terrified to have that conversation. I was like rehearsing it in the mirror.
That's
I was going over in my head, over and over. I was terrified to have that conversation with him because I was terrified to use anything that looked like compliance. But in that conversation, I displayed a method of influence called legitimating, which is, I'm the platoon leader, you're the platoon sergeant, yes, we're a team, but I'm in charge. And that's okay. It's okay to actually be in charge when you're put in charge.
Yeah.
And so that platoon was much more successful. And frankly, it was safer and it was more combat effective because I was much better able to give that platoon what it needed.
Okay, so you're in your second stint as a platoon commander. What I'm hearing you say is really what you did is you wrote down expectations.
Absolutely.
And I'm picturing you with this grizzled, as I said before, combat veteran. I don't know what it actually looked like, but what you said is you were terrified what his response would be. What was his response?
He said, "Sir, this is exactly what I need. This is exactly what we need. You've told me exactly what I need to do, and I'm going to fulfill these expectations." And I was so relieved, right?
Yeah.
Like just huge sigh of relief that this didn't go poorly. But then after that, so I had transitioned. The platoon that I was in at first was out in the countryside. The platoon that I was taking over was operating much more in the city. They hadn't gone out to the country, and it's two different styles of fighting. But that platoon, when I took over, we were getting ready to go out and fight in the country. So they had to learn a new method of fighting, a method that I was very familiar with. And so I was the subject matter expert on the things that we needed to do.
Okay.
And one of those things was reacting to an IED, which is an explosive device, an improvised explosive device that the Taliban put all over the place. You know, platoons hit IEDs all the time. So they needed to learn how to react to IEDs the right way, which isn't the way that the manual said to do.
Okay.
So I set up a little training lane there on the base, and we just drove around, and I said, okay, the lead vehicle's hit an IED. What are you going to do? Well, they did a whole bunch of maneuvers the way that the manual says to do it. I put a stop to the whole thing. I said, everybody stop. Bring in all the leaders. I brought in all my squad leaders, all my team leaders, and I said, you are never, ever going to do that again. And everyone looked at me like, who is this 22-year-old, kid?
Genius.
Right. If only. Who's this 22-year-old kid? And they shot back with, hey, sir, that's what the manual says to do. That's what it says in doctrine. And I was like, doctrine's going to get you killed, Sergeant. I had started to find my mojo a little bit about compliance, and I said, this is what we're going to do. And I gave them the procedure for what we were going to do. Because the thing is, if you hit an IED, you don't want to go driving around because there's IEDs all over the place. There's never just one.
Right.
And so you have to stop, and there's a bunch of other things that you need to do. We don't need to go into the details.
Right.
But the point is, I laid out for that platoon, this is what we are doing. Do you have any questions? But there was no argument.
Yeah.
And that's what that platoon needed. Imagine if I hadn't done that.
Right.
Imagine if I had been like, well, let me explain to you from my experience, I would have just been, it's like, no, there's no argument. There's no discussion. This is the way we're doing it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's, wow. What a powerful example, because, it's life and death. And, I think a lot of us might struggle with the compliance end of the spectrum, particularly if we're working with a nonprofit, a church, things like that, because we don't know that what we're doing is about life and death, and we need to be doing our jobs better. And so I think that is a good reminder for Christian leaders even to think deeply about, hey, what we do actually matters, and so we need to get all parts of this right.
Absolutely.
If you're just joining with us, we're with Austin Caroe, U.S. Army officer, talking about really lessons in leadership and how that applies to our life today. We do need to go into a break. Before we go into the break, this is the part of the program where KELP Radio thanks its impact partners. The impact partners are local businesses, nonprofits, churches, educational institutions that have joined us in our journey to serve our community through radio ministry. The impact partner I want to point out today, haven't mentioned them in a while, is Caring Companions. If you have maybe an elderly loved one or someone close to you who has just gone through an operation and needs some help but wants to stay at home, Caring Companions is there for you. They have, of course, highly qualified home care specialists, and it's been so much fun on this program how many guests actually use their services. They speak so highly of them. Really good people over there. The website is caringcompanionsep.com. So grateful to them and all our other impact partners. If you are a business owner or manager and you're interested in what becoming a KELP radio impact partner entails, get in touch with us at the station. Really appreciate those people who've reached out. I'll walk you through it. Contact us through the website. Give us a call, whatever you're comfortable with. I'll explain how we can possibly work together, and hopefully we can serve our community together, and people can know what you're doing as well. So appreciate all the Impact Partners. You can find them at KELPradio.com. We're going to go into a break. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
Greetings, KELP listeners. My name is Terry Gray, and I have the joy and privilege of serving as the pastor of Calvary Chapel Sun City, located on the west side of El Paso. I also have the joy of connecting with the radio audience in the borderland through the Summons broadcast heard each weekday at 5 p.m. right here on this station. On Summons, we study the Bible book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, precept by precept. Please join us each weekday at 5 p.m. for Summons right here on KELP. Greetings, KELP listeners. This is Terry Gray, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Sun City, and speaker on the Summons broadcast heard each weekday at 5 p.m. right here on this station. Calvary Chapel, Sun City is located at 960 West Borderland Road on the west side of El Paso. We hold services on Wednesday evenings at 7 and on Sunday mornings at 9 and 11. If you are without a church home, we would love to have you join us for worship and Bible study. You can find out more information about us on the web at www.ccsuncity.org.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
We are back, and you are listening to 915 Talk. I am your host, Andy Freck, and today we're with Austin Caroe, U.S. Army officer, talking about really lessons in leadership, but talking about this idea of compliance versus commitment, kind of a spectrum of leadership. I think when I was working as a missionary, the mission would teach us the difference between transactional leadership and transformational leadership, and it feels very similar. It was interesting for me, Austin. Most of our listeners know I was a missionary in Russia for many years, and when I first came to Russia and started having a Russian staff, I'm going to say it, the Russian people are trained to follow orders. And I started off also very much on the commitment end of the spectrum. Hey, we're friends, and you guys pray and do what the Lord tells you, that kind of thing. And it was very difficult for them, and it did not give them a sense of security, really. And so what I found is I have a new staff person. They love the Lord. They want to do something. Give them a bunch of instructions. They're super comfortable. And over time, we can move towards that commitment into the spectrum. So what would be maybe your words of caution in all of this as we're having this conversation?
Yeah, it's really about, it's exactly what you said, which is you have to use the right method of influence at the right time in the right context.
Yeah.
So the context that you were in, you were mismatched for your natural skills, right?
Sure.
You're a natural people person. You want to build commitment. You want to be able to just suggest things, and people just sort of know what to do, right? That would be your preference.
Yeah.
But you went into a situation where that wasn't possible.
Sure.
People needed direct, focused instructions.
Yeah.
And I think, we talked a little bit about earlier that we tend to be, in this country, we tend to focus more on commitment, especially in Christian communities. We focus more on building commitment and using those sort of softer approaches. We struggle to use those more commitment-based methods. Part of the reason for that is and why that's promoted in leadership books is because who reads leadership books? Typically people that are leading other people that are working in office settings. Most of us, even me, most of the time now in the Army is mostly an office setting.
Yeah.
But shift managers on oil rigs don't read leadership books.
Right.
So we lose that idea of compliance. But compliance is still incredibly important because people do need direction and they need motivation about how to do things.
Right.
But again, the word of caution there is if you naturally drift to one to the other, you need to try to practice methods that you're not comfortable with, but don't go overboard and don't do it just for no reason. Don't be like, well, I'm a commitment-based person. Tomorrow I'm going to go into work and I'm going to really get some compliance out of people. If things are going well in your organization and you're well liked and things are going well, there's no need to change anything, but you need to be ready, ready yourself for that time that someone starts showing up late or starts breaking rules.
Right.
Ready yourself to use those compliance-based methods to get them back on track because ultimately that's what's serving them.
Right. Yeah. I it's so funny what you said. People who read leadership books are usually working in offices, and particularly when you talk about safety-related issues, those aren't the people reading the leadership books, and that's where compliance is very high up.
Right, but those people also, the problem is a lot of those people that are put in those settings aren't given any leadership training. And so they're not even, they look to their boss above them and how they're doing things. So, you may get into a position where someone is, even if they're in an industry like that, they get put into that position and they're still not comfortable using compliance-based methods. They don't get that leadership training. People that are getting developed in terms of our companies that have the time and resources to set up leadership programs, leadership development programs. And that's where you get a lot of the commitment-based methods of influence.
Right.
But people that are working in more blue-collar jobs, a lot of those types of companies, margins are very thin, time is very short. They don't have time to set up deliberate training programs.
Right.
So a lot of their managers never get properly trained.
Yeah, wow. Again, I want to go back to this again. Again, we're Christian radio. Most of the people listening are part of a church community. When you look at a church, are there certain things about leadership that maybe you find mildly, I'm just going to use the safest word I can think of, interesting, because your background is the military?
No, not necessarily. I mean, most of the churches that I've been to have been extremely well led. And clergy are very good at blending those methods of influence. I think that we also have to make a distinction between sort of leading the flock, what is said in church on Sunday, and sort of leading the staff. And leading the things that have to get done. And I think that those are probably two different things. And I would say that, there's no one specific here, but there may be cases where a leader, a pastor, gets up in front of the congregation and it's all about God's love, God's mercy, and then behind the scenes, they are extremely toxic. They're putting a lot of pressure on people. They're abusing their position. And we see stories about that all the time. And I would say, a lot of the times, I think in a lot of churches you might need to see almost the reverse, where I think we need to we talk a lot about God's mercy. But we don't talk enough, in my opinion, in most churches, we don't talk enough about God's justice. Because he is both perfectly just and perfectly merciful.
Sure.
And, we have to follow God's law, and we have to follow the things that he has given us. And this, his law that's laid out in the Sermon on the Mount, those aren't suggestions. Right? Like that, those are the expectations of behavior.
Right.
That is Jesus saying, this is compliance. Like, these are the things you will do. Blessed be the peacemakers, blessed be the meek, etc.
Yeah, and I'm going to add my own personal observation. I think a church that is often just what we're terming commitment-based, where it's only about relationship, very often is a church that stays the same size and slowly dies. A church that is only about compliance often is growing. It looks from the outside like it's strong, but there's a tension and relationship inside the church. And so it is interesting to look for churches to kind of cheer on that are wrestling with this, grappling with this, because you talked about in the military, your leadership is a matter of life and death. You talk about if you see an IED on the road, or the first truck in the convoy might hit one, God forbid, what do you do? That's life and death. And if we believe the gospel, what we're doing as the church is also a matter of life and death. And so we need to figure this out as well. We only have a few minutes left, Austin, sadly. I want to ask, kind of go in a little bit of a different direction here in the few minutes we have left. Fort Bliss is in the community. A lot of the military are either in local churches or looking for local churches, or maybe no interest. I'm sure there's the whole spectrum there, which is perfectly understandable. What can the church do better in El Paso to serve the military community?
I mean, soldiers have been here for decades, and churches already do a great job with outreach to soldiers. I really can't think of anything off the top of my head that they can do better except build those relationships and ask those soldiers, hey, bring more people. Let people know that they're welcome here. Bring some friends.
Yeah, love it. And at the beginning of this program, we say in the intro, the world is looking at El Paso. What will we say to the world? And part of the reason we have that statement is because when I moved to El Paso, what I saw is the world is looking at El Paso. But what often happens is a national correspondent flying in from Chicago, New York, LA, Atlanta, whatever the case would be, and they come in, they fly in, and they're here just a few hours, and they're telling the rest of the world what's happening here. What is one thing you would want the world to know about the city that you now call home?
Yeah, I mean, my family and I, we love El Paso. We love the people here. It takes some time to get to know the city.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just fly in and fly out, you're just not going to get to know it.
Right.
You're not going to see things like La Nube downtown.
Right.
How amazing that is. You're not going to get a chance to go to all the great places in the city to meet people, because the city really, at the end of the day, the city is built on relationships. And one of the reasons I love El Paso is almost no matter where I go, I see someone I know all the time. Even though it's a big city, I see people out and about. And it's really about building those relationships, and that's what makes El Paso special. So I would say, don't judge El Paso based on one short interaction or one short trip. Come, get to know people, and that's really where the magic of the city is.
Love it. And last question in the couple minutes we have left. You can answer this however you want. I'll put it to you a couple different ways. But when you look at the U.S. Army, if you could snap your fingers and change one thing, or pray for one thing and see that happen, what would that one thing be?
Well, I can't really comment on. I don't speak for the Army, and I don't want to comment on Army policy. If there's one thing I could change about the Army,
yeah. Is that a fair question?
I mean, it's not an unfair question. I don't know if I'm super comfortable answering.
Okay,
There's a lot of things that I mean, there's a lot of things that we talk about internally that could be changed, but
right.
I don't know if it's something I could answer.
Okay,
right off the top of my
that's
head.
fair enough. Okay, and appreciate you coming in today. Appreciate your service. Then I'll change the question. One thing you would snap your fingers and you would love to see become better in El Paso.
I love the development that's going on downtown, and I want to see the downtown continue to develop.
Yeah,
that's really if I could snap my fingers, I would have all the downtown completely developed and filled out. That's the one thing that I would change. I love downtown the way it is.
You're going to get a resounding amen from me. I love what's happening down there, and I hope that we can continue to build on the success that's there. Austin, thank you so much for coming in today. I do need to remember to do a disclaimer again. My computer crashed in the middle of this, so here we go. The views and opinions expressed by Austin Caroe on this show, on his YouTube channel, and his online newsletter are his own, and not necessarily the views and opinions of the U.S. Army, the Department of War, or the U.S. government. But having said all that, I appreciate you coming in, Austin, and having really a candid discussion about how you practiced leadership in the military, you learn from it, and you're sharing that knowledge now with the world.
Thanks for having me on, Andy. It was a pleasure.
As we always say, let's learn to love our city and love our neighbors, and I'll tack on, let's love our military as well, the fine folks there, and give God all the glory. This has been 915 Talk.
You have been listening to 915 Talk, a production of Desert Voice Media. To listen to this or any previous edition of 915 Talk, just visit desertvoice.media and click on the 915 Talk link. Let's continue to learn to love our city, love our neighbors, and give God all the glory.
Hi, I'm Johnny Erickson Todd, and I receive a lot